Hey guys, it's Gary, doing another unprepared video. I had called in sick to work on Saturday, and it seems in order for them to get revenge on me for doing so, they've pretty much hardly scheduled me to work at all this week, which means I don't get paid. It's a very kind of petty atmosphere that I really, among other things, don't like about this job. So I called in sick Saturday, I worked Sunday, and all of a sudden I was off on Monday, which is very unusual. Monday's an incredibly busy day. I've never had a Monday off since I started there. All of a sudden they had me scheduled for Monday off, had me work Tuesday, but only had me work 6 hours. When I come back to the office, I look at the schedule, and I see that I'm off Wednesday and Thursday. And trust me, they will call me if they need me. But it's that kind of petty crap that I can't stand. So anyway, I'm off work. My video camera is skewed. It's a little better. I'm a professional. Talk about no preparation. So I decided to, I started, not having access to buying a lot of new stuff. I'm still, here and there, I'm using some points on my credit card to pick up new CDs. But nothing like the good old days. And so it's driving me back into my collection, which is large, and the weird thing is the stuff I've been listening to a lot lately are things I've already done videos on. And I'm stuck in this thing. I'm listening to a lot of Richard Lanehart, and I'm listening to things like Bill Connor's Swimming with the Hole in My Body a lot. And Randall McClellan, which is an old cassette thing that never even came out on CD that Vinyl Spin Jeff sent me, which is his great spacey 50-minute electronic thing. So I've been listening to a lot of things that I've talked about already, and though I did pull out a couple of my, going back into the archives, my, old stuff, rediscovering and replaying things that, maybe I haven't listened to for a few years. And I pulled out a couple pretty obscure guitarists. Now, when you talk about obscure in the VC, it's kind of relative. There's obscure where people have never released albums except for on their own label, and never, 300 copies out there. I don't really mean obscure in that way. But fairly not incredibly well known in a larger general sense, or within the jazz genre, new age, or whatever genre they exist in. Started listening to some guitarists, and decided, maybe I don't have, I have very little in terms of volume of editions of this person's work, but decided to maybe show and talk a little bit about the German jazz guitarist, who might be playing a bit loud in the background, Volker Kriegel, who I don't know to what extent he's known in the VC. You would have to be a very hardcore jazz fan, and probably specifically German jazz, to know the musicians that came out of there, because unlike some German jazz musicians, he never recorded for a big label in America or something like ECM where people would have really heard him. I'm not even 100% sure. Yes, as a matter of fact, and this goes back to the days before the internet, when you could find out instantly a lot of information on people. Being a big Eberhard Weber fan, German musician, mostly through his ECM jazz recordings. I had read, and this goes back to the very late 70s, very early, maybe 1980, 81 maybe, that in addition to his solo albums, Eberhard Weber played in this group called the United Jazz and Rock Ensemble. And I had read that somewhere, and attempted to get their recordings. This is before the CD era. This is in the LP era. And they were impossible to get. You could not get them here in America. Even as imports, they didn't come through. And it was only many, many, many years later, even years after CDs came out, that some of these started leaking through these United Jazz and Rock Ensemble recordings, started making their way through slowly. These are, these are, for the most part, a lot of them are out of print. Somebody started reissuing these a couple years ago, but only certain albums. And these are on Mood Records. And Mood Records isn't around anymore. German jazz label. But through my love of Eberhard Weber, had all his solo albums, found that he played in this other group, the United Jazz and Rock Ensemble, which is more of a live touring band made up of a lot of German jazz musicians that recorded solo albums and recorded on their own, coming together, playing each other's compositions. Wolfgang Downer on keyboards was a founding member. Guitarist Volker Kriegel, which is where I heard Volker Kriegel for the first time. Barbara Thompson, the British female saxophone player. Eberhard Weber was a founding member. Albert Mangelsdorf, the trombone player. Charlie Mariano, my favorite saxophone player in the world, was also a founding member. They recorded a whole bunch of albums, which were available here for a while on Mood Records, but I'm not sure who distributed them here. But this is one of the first ones. And I discovered a lot of, the musicians. Well, I knew Charlie Mariano, I knew Eberhard Weber, Barbara Thompson I'd heard of. Why am I forgetting the drummers? John Huisman was the founding member drummer. I believe he's married to Barbara Thompson. Quite an ensemble of writers as well, and they all play each other's material. That was the basic band, and other people kind of came and went over the years. A lot of personnel changes, and people passed away and everything. Ian Carr played in the group as well. But I started picking these up because I already owned everything by Eberhard Weber, and I was a huge fan of his, and Charlie Mariano's playing. And I discovered Volker Kriegel through this, because Kriegel, the guitarist, also a founding member, German jazz musician, who had recorded on his own. Now, in Germany, Volker Kriegel was actually known as one of the guys who started kind of the fusion movement. But, you can't compare his style of guitar, still for the most part very clean, only very, very, very rarely would he use distortion. So when I say fusion guitar, this is in the late 60s. It might, by comparison, think of some of the Gary Burton late 60s recordings that had guitar in there. It was kind of considered fusion, and yet most of the guitar, whoever the guitarist was in the Gary Burton band back in the late 60s, for the most part, didn't use a lot of distortion and all that. And when you listen to it now, it sounds like pretty pure jazz. But at that time, there were elements of let's say, rock music, but maybe more, maybe less bebop-oriented music. Elements of it, and they consider that to be fusion, but light years away from the distorted, Mahavishnu, John McLaughlin kind of thing, and Mahavishnu Orchestra, and Al Di Meola in Return to Forever. Miles away from that, because honestly, if it was like that, I wouldn't listen to it. But I discovered Volker Kriegel, and began liking his playing in the United Jazz and Rock Ensemble and his compositions. So, with Eberhard Weber, Charlie Mariano, people like that, I became a huge, huge fan of it. I'm not a big band fan, really. I mean, I do, I've done videos talking a bit about, Buddy Rich, big bands and things like that. But there's, only a few exceptions where I really like listening to big bands. The Lighthouse Jazz Ensemble, that was in Hermosa Beach, California in the late 50s. That's a bit of an exception there. Most of the United Jazz and Rock Ensembles, this one's called Live in Berlin. Most of their albums are either live albums in front of an audience or essentially live albums in the studio, because it's a big band. They don't really do overdubs. So a lot of them were live albums. most of these, let me see, this one's 81. And they play, if you're familiar with Eberhard Weber's solo material or Wolfgang Downer's solo material, they actually will re-record tracks that have appeared on their solo albums in a different big band format. So, and then sometimes there's pieces like from Eberhard Weber that don't appear anywhere else. But it's always interesting to hear tunes that in a smaller ensemble, hearing them redone for this rather large band. So most of their recordings, start, I think, around 78 or so, go into the early 80s, continued on. Eberhard Weber had the stroke. He was replaced. Volker Kriegel passed away. There were, Charlie Mariano passed away as well. So, during the time that the band was still active. Ack van Rooyen was another trumpet and flugelhorn player, who's somebody that appeared on some early Eberhard Weber albums. John Huisman was always the drummer. Wolfgang Downer was always there on keyboards. Barbara Thompson, Ian Carr. Some of these don't even have recording dates on them. This one looks like it's from 1977, so they started pretty early. These barely kind of snuck over into in the CD era of the late 80s, and I don't have all of them actually, but I have most of them. Here's one from February 1987, around 7. Eberhard Weber in the back, and Barbara Thompson in front, Charlie Mariano in front. Picking up, I think Volker Kriegel is the guy with the glasses all the way on the left. Interesting stuff. Got to be in the mood for it because, like I said, big bands are in general not my thing. Here's one. This might be a 79, The Break-Even Point. Wolfgang Downer, big part of this. He's one of the few people that, were able to stay through the life of the group. Great, interesting stuff. Especially if you're a fan of the individual musicians. I think this is a compilation album. One called Highlights. Pretty sure it's a compilation album. And in recent years, now all those kind of went out of print, at least from what I can see in America. But they did do a couple reissues where they doubled up on a 2 CD set, and which came out in very recent years, 2010. And these actually made it over here to America, though, again, I'm not sure if they're still in print, even though it was just re-released a few years ago. So there's a pairing of The Break-Even Point and United Live Opus, which was one I didn't have, which is why I bought the 2 CD set. The second one I didn't have as an individual. So it's 2 CDs, so they reissued those. And then they did an interesting kind of compilation. Instead of just doing a best of or re-releasing 2 previous albums, these were released separately as well. They did the United Jazz on Rock Ensemble, plays Wolfgang Downer on one disc and plays Volker Kriegel on the other. And what they did is they took just the Wolfgang Downer compositions from the various albums and just put them all together. So all of the tracks were composed by Wolfgang Downer, and he plays on all of them. Same thing with the Volker Kriegel disc. They took all the Volker Kriegel compositions. Usually it's just one on each album. Usually there's 8 or 9 tracks on an album. So each member generally only gets 1 track. And they kind of compiled most of the individual compositions on this one CD. So in the case of the Volker Kriegel thing, you pretty much will get a solo in on every track because it's all compiled of his compositions, which is nice. If you're a fan of either of these musicians, it's nice to hear them. They get a little more time in on these albums because they're their own tracks. But I like his clean playing. I like his aggressive playing a little bit. Now, in the German jazz world, he's fairly well known as being a bit of a fusion pioneer. And his music does get a little aggressive in a non-jazz way, maybe sometimes. it does get funky at times. There's some funk things I've heard from him. But it's not the kind of American kind of fusion that you have in mind when you think of fusion and, that aggressive guitar rock stuff. So I'm doing terribly today. Maybe I slept too much. My mind is not 100% there. Now, here in America right now, this is a really bad time to join to. Of course it's a bad time. That's why I'm doing this video. It's a bad time to attempt, I think, to find his music, because I generally use Amazon as a bit of a barometer to find out if something's in print, because there will be many listings of albums that are out of print, but you can clearly tell that if Amazon isn't selling it directly, and if there's sellers selling new and used copies at outrageous prices, that means something's out of print. Well, that's the case with, right now, just about everything from Volker Kriegel appears to be out of print. And I only have a few discs. But I'm going to go with the one I highly recommend, which I really like. A lot of short pieces on here, though. Most of these are from the LP era. So, he's got a lot of albums that are in the 38, 39-minute running time. This one has 9 tracks on it, so none of them, only one track even hits 5 minutes. So it's a little more concise. But on a couple tracks, 2 or 3 tracks, Eberhard Weber plays on here. So the weird thing was, because it was only after the advent of the internet, and like I mentioned, I'm a huge Eberhard Weber fan, that I realized that the 2 closest and longest musical associations that Eberhard Weber had were 2 people that he pretty much never recorded with on ECM. Wolfgang Downer, which did record an album on ECM it's out of print, I don't think it ever came out on CD. Wolfgang Downer did one very, very early solo album as a leader on ECM, and Eberhard Weber was the bass player. And for some reason, Wolfgang Downer never made another solo album on ECM, but Eberhard Weber did. But Wolfgang Downer was a very long, pretty much throughout his career, friend, colleague, and co-conspirator musically with both Volker Kriegel and what's the keyboard's name? You see, this is why I should start all over again, but I'm not going to. Okay. Anyway, where was I? I think I overslept, and my mind is definitely Wolfgang Downer. I just forgot his name. So Eberhard Weber's 2 longest associations were with Wolfgang Downer and Volker Kriegel, which I never knew. All the years that I listened to Eberhard Weber before the internet, and even after the internet, before a lot of information was up, I never knew that these 2 guys, pretty much through their entire careers, were associated and playing with Eberhard Weber, because it never popped up in Eberhard Weber's albums, which is a bit of a surprise. But Eberhard Weber apparently went through many years of doing concerts with these guys, playing in each other's bands, and yet there's no proof of that on ECM, actually. Eberhard Weber guesting on their albums, whatever. This is if you can get a hold of this, it's called Journal. This is from 81, August 81. This was recorded. Like I said, a lot of 9 shorter tracks, very jazzy. It's playing in the background, and it's weird because when you think of, this is the guy known for being one of the founding fathers of German fusion. There's really nothing fusion-y about it, really. But this is I guess at a time when jazz was very pure, and any outside say bebop influences were possibly considered fusion. And like I said, he does play funky every once in a while. Here's another one, Schon Aussichen. I should be able to pronounce some German, but I can't. This is another one, bit of an odd one, from 1983. This was also on Mood Records. Mood Records was partially owned by Volker Kriegel. And I'm not sure what happened after Volker Kriegel passed away. I think somebody holds a license, and some of these do manage to come out. A lot of those United Jazz and Rock Ensemble things came out on Mood Records, but a couple of them have been re-released since Volker Kriegel's death. So somebody out there has the rights, hopefully, and we will hopefully see reissues of his solo stuff. But it doesn't really seem to be happening. At least the ones I'm showing you are out of print. Here's one from '87, Palazzo Blue. Rare in that this one has 4 longer tracks on it. Pretty set band of drums, saxophone, keyboards, bass guitar, and Volker Kriegel on guitar. I like the cartoon work, which I'm sure was done by Volker Kriegel as well. It goes to show how even in Europe, I thought jazz was more popular in Europe, and musicians stood a chance of making a better living in Europe, but apparently not. Because looking at his biography, I was listening to Kriegel, and for whatever reason, when I started being able to get a hold of the solo albums, those ones that I just showed, I guess I hadn't looked him up in the online to get a history, because I thought he was still alive, only to find out that he died apparently from cancer in 2003. So that's quite a while ago now. I don't think I found that out until within the last few years. He was only 59 when he passed away. The first time, and I can't find this reference online now, but I had read that he was staying at his daughter's house in Spain when he passed away, suffering from cancer. But I can't find that reference anymore. That was something I found a few years ago. But 2003, he passed away. Very, very sad. Interesting thing about him is, in addition, as I was trying to make this point a couple minutes ago, in addition to his playing, he played live in other people's bands and his own bands, etc., etc. Was part owner of Mood Records. He was a cartoonist, which goes back to me saying, I think that's, this is probably his artwork here. He was actually a cartoonist and appeared in several German language newspapers. His biography says he was a radio broadcaster, but I don't know in what capacity. And a director of films, and again, I don't know in what capacity. And an author of books related to music, probably in German. But it just goes to show, and I had read, and again, I couldn't find this now on the internet, but when I first found that he passed away a few years ago, and I did some internet searches on him, I found that apparently his primary way of earning a living for quite a few years was as a cartoonist, not a musician, which is incredible, because, he partially owned a record label, he played live gigs, he released solo albums, he was in Europe where jazz is more popular, and yet his primary way of earning a living is doing something else. And that's in addition to directing, working in movies and doing radio broadcasts. Like I said, I don't know in what capacity he was a radio broadcaster. But it's a bit sad, when you think of somebody of that talent who has been playing for so many years. He has a lot of solo albums out, guys. This is what I'm showing is nothing. Got a lot of solo albums out, especially in the period of the late 60s, early 70s, when it seemed like he was recording a whole lot. Now, the one thing that came out fairly recently, I want to say within the last few years, I'll try to find the date on here. 2012, so it wasn't that long ago. I was amazed when I saw this as a new release back in 2012. I actually pre-ordered this. A new Volker Kriegel album, because nobody's even putting out the old stuff. There was a new issue of a previously unreleased concert from 1981, Volker Kriegel and Friends. And I got excited for a lot of reasons. A new Volker Kriegel album, not a compilation. This is a all-alive concert from 1981 with a 5-piece band and Eberhard Weber on bass, no less. And at that point, seeing Eberhard Weber play, actually, since I got this, I've discovered there are YouTube clips of Eberhard Weber playing in other folks' bands online. But when I got this, when it first came out in 2012, I hadn't seen any live performance clips of Eberhard Weber ever playing live. And this is something that is still in print. Very reasonable price, too. It is a, it's a one-night appearance. It's a concert from the 81 at the Jazz Fest Berlin. The other members in the band I've never heard of, but he's got, apart from Ralph Hubner, the drummer who actually played on a couple early Eberhard Weber recordings. So it's drummer Eberhard Weber on bass, Volker Kriegel on guitar. He also plays electric sitar on a track on here, an electric keyboard player, and a vibraphone player. So it's a nice band. It's a 2-disc set. It's a CD and a DVD of the concert. And it's really reasonably priced, and I'm going to recommend it before it goes out of print. CD and DVD, they're pretty much identical. CD runs a little shorter only because they take out some gaps of like the band tuning up and talking to the audience and some extended applause and things like that. They take some of that off on the CD, so the CD runs a few minutes shorter than DVD. DVD is 70 minutes, and the CD is 65 or something like that. I forget exactly. But all of the tunes are there. All of the tracks are there. And it's interesting because you get, you can listen to it and you can listen to it and watch it. And, when you tend to watch it, your attention maybe isn't fully on the music because you're watching, or at least in my case, musicians I've never gotten to see play before, like Volker Kriegel and Eberhard Weber. At least on TV, I did actually see Eberhard Weber play live once. So I was a little surprised that this came out here in America. I wouldn't be so surprised to see it in Europe. Actually, maybe I still would be because Volker Kriegel is still, with all his albums being out of print, I was surprised that anything new would creep out. It's a nice one-off concert, mistakes and all. The video, the actual quality of the video, the sound is fine. The quality of the video is not great. It was filmed with TV cameras, so it looks very much like video versus film. It looks like it was something that was maybe recorded to play as an edited TV broadcast later, where, they pick out one or two tracks by a band. And, this was a jazz festival, so they probably made a compilation TV show. And so, 1981, camera work's a little crude. Video quality is a little crude. It's video, not film. But it's fine. It's clear. It's wonderful to see these musicians playing. You're not going to get, obviously, a chance to see Volker Kriegel, who passed away in 2003, play. You're probably not going to get a chance to see Eberhard Weber play anymore either. So, this is maybe one reason why I would do this now, since everything else by him is pretty much, you're paying outrageous prices if you're going to, buy his solo albums now, or if you can find them, great. I didn't look on Discogs to see if something like his Journal solo album, which I really like, may be available a little bit more cheaply than what I'm seeing it used and new on Amazon. But this is out there, and this is good. And if you're an Eberhard Weber fan, holy Christ, when it starts, I haven't watched the video for a while. I just put it in, and on the very first song, Eberhard Weber's more out front than Volker Kriegel is. It's almost like an Eberhard Weber solo band, you would think. Very much in the forefront. So I was going to do this video on a few obscure guitarists, but then decided to keep it shorter and, maybe introduce people to one person at a time. And I didn't realize, I had that much. I had forgotten about the United Jazz and Rock Ensemble stuff. Interesting guy. I was really sad to read that he had passed away, just a few years ago. And again, it was one of those musicians that once I read that, it was hard for me to go back and listen to his music for a while. Really, for a couple of years maybe. Only recently was I able to start to listen to it again. But it's so commonplace now that musicians are passing away that I loved and listened to during their lifetime. And it's hard for me to listen to them. It's like an emotional thing after they pass for some time. And it seems like it's happening more with musicians now than ever in my lifetime. Good thing I'm not permanently banning these people from my listening list. But yeah, Volker Kriegel, if you've never heard of him, I didn't think to try to sample him on YouTube to see if there's anything out there. Not sure. But nice, talented guy, I think, nice guitarist. 59 years old when he passed away. Obviously a talented guy. And I would have never heard of him if it wasn't without the Eberhard Weber, if it wasn't for the Eberhard Weber affiliation there. So I thought I would do a video before, I don't know, will they call me into work tomorrow and then work me 7 days straight? I don't know. So I thought I would do something, talk about somebody obscure and, maybe start a series of fairly obscure musicians. So hope everybody's doing well. Hope this video has some value. Hope the music isn't too loud in the background. And I'll be back whenever, and I'll see you then, I guess.